So, hi everybody, I'm Bradshaw, as you heard already. How's everyone feeling? Good? Right on. So, I'm going to talk about something today that is a really important topic, something that is at the core of everything we do. I'm going to talk about communication, cross-conflict communication. And what I'm going to talk about is how to overcome pretty serious obstacles in our communication. So, in our society, we have developed an incredible ability that no other animal has developed, not in our society, but as a species we have. We've developed the ability to talk about our feelings, talk about emotions, be able to articulate these things, and that's opened up Pandora's box for us, right? Because we now are able to get in touch with the way that we feel, we can articulate it, and we kind of expect other people to be able to understand how we feel. And that leads us to a breakdown in communication, because when you're not just grunting, right, and pointing at stuff, which is what we did from, if you think animals evolved about 500 million years ago, mammals evolved about 200 million years ago, and if you look at the evolutionary cycle of things, great apes evolved 15 million years ago, modern humans, we're looking at probably about 200,000 years ago, then we've got written language, spoken language, maybe 10 to 15,000 years ago. It's hard to say because they couldn't write it down. And then written language, we're looking at maybe the last 5,000 years. So we've got this huge history. And what's happened recently is with the advent of things like text messaging, email, telephones, the last 100 years, we've started to separate ourselves from our communication, from our interactions. So whereas interaction used to always be in person, 100% of the time, we've increasingly gone to a world where communication is via remote control, okay? Where we're communicating not in person. We don't have that dynamic. We don't have those cues. And this creates a bit of a conundrum because as we have less interactions, the interactions become more important, right? If you're, say, you're a virtual worker, you don't really see your boss or your clients very often. When you actually do see them in person, it's that much more important that those interactions go right. If you think about with dating, right? People are using Twitter or Tinder and Match.com. All their first interactions are online or using these different things. When they actually meet the person in person, that interaction is really important. So our interactions are becoming increasingly important. At the same time, we're having less and less of them. What happens to any muscle that you don't use? It atrophies, right? It goes away. The skill either doesn't get built up or just doesn't develop in the first place. So we have this ever-growing problem that technology has brought to us where we're just not that horribly skilled in our interpersonal communication. So what I'd like to ask of you here is, first of all, who'd like to have better communication in their relationships, whether it's personal, professional, show of hands? Anyone not want to have it? Show of hands? Okay. All right. So we all want better communication. What I'd like you to do is set an intention, okay? Because an intention is what gets you where you want to go, right? The way that I got here today, it wasn't the car. It was my intention. Because I could have taken Uber, I could have taken a taxi, I could have taken a bus, I could have bicycled, I could have walked like Forrest Gump, hitchhiked. There are an infinite number of ways I could have got here. But the only thing that got me here was my intention. So I'll ask of you is, while I'm talking for the next 12, 15 minutes, have an intention. Think about the relationships in your life where communication could be better, where things get a little sticky, where things get friction. And while I'm talking, look for a nugget that you could apply to one of those relationships. Have that intention while we're moving forward. So I'm going to give you this very serious psychological profile test. The first question. I take pleasure in the failure and misery of those around me. Anyone? Yeah? Okay. I intentionally say confusing things to cause friction and make others I work with unhappy. Anyone? I purposely undercommunicate to leave people confused or hurt, then laugh maniacally at their pain. I am plotting to make everyone else fail in the hopes that I will end up looking better by contrast. I strive daily and put a lot of energy into really sucking at my job. And finally, everyone is out to get me. Trick me, this whole event is just an elaborate trap to make me feel dumb. Plus, I'm pretty sure there are monsters. Monsters! Okay, so Any takers on that? Anyone's like, yeah, that totally resonates. That is how I feel. Anyone? Okay. So this is silly, right? This is kind of a little silly thing. So why do I put that up there? I put it up there because who's felt this way about other people, right? You're at work and you're like, God, is this person trying to suck at their job? Is that what they're doing? What's going on here, right? Or you're like interacting with your significant other or a family member or a friend, and you're like, are you just trying to piss me off? Is that what's going on? Are you trying to undermine this? I mean, show of hands. Who's felt this way? I think all of us have felt this way, right? So why is that? Well, Deming, great thinker, had this whole concept that you don't have bad workers. Everyone wants to do good at their job. They just don't have the right structure, right? And I think communication is the same. I think for the most part, there's a 1 or 2% maybe sociopaths who might actually, yeah, woohoo, let's do that. But I think most people, they really want good, right? In their relationships, they want good. They want to have a frictionless communication in their relationships. But things get derailed. So what goes wrong? Well, what is communication, right? We want to be understood. We have this deep part of us that desperately wants to be understood. And that's why we learn to speak, right? We learn to speak, we learn to write, to get the thoughts that are in our heads inside of someone else's head. And grunting like the caveman and pointing at things didn't cut it. So we evolved this incredible ability to use language to try to express our feelings. And who would agree that's what they want when they communicate? They want to be understood. Show of hands. Seriously, get involved. Come on, show of hands. Okay, so we all want to be understood, right? So this is communication, right? We seek first to be understood. This is what we go after, right? Agreed? Yes? Is this good communication? I would argue no. And I think Stephen Covey wrote in his book about something called empathic communication. I refer to it as intentional communication. And good communication actually isn't just about being understood. It's about trying to understand the other person. It's about having that intention, right? Because communication isn't what you say, it's what the other person's hearing. If the other person can't hear what you're saying, you're not going to get that understanding. So Covey had this concept that I'm going to start with today, and it is seek first to understand. There should be a 2 in there. Then to be understood. Okay? So what I'd like you all to do is I'm going to do a little exercise. This is a Bill first. I talked to Riker about this. This is the first time for Bill. So we're going to do a little exercise. Find someone else in the room, partner up really quick. I want you to think about a topic that you could talk about passionately for about 15 seconds, okay? Something either positive or negative, it doesn't really matter. For me, I could talk about the drive here today, right? Going through traffic, I'm on the freeway, 2 cars in here, and then a third one pulls out in front of me. They're all going the same speed. Why do we have a fast lane? I could talk about this, right? I've got energy about that. So think about something you've got a little energy about. Partner up. If you don't have a partner, raise your hand. Someone else will find you. And what I'd like you to do is face each other, you know, in a comfortable position. So everyone up, 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 up. Yes, I mean you. Everyone up. We're making Bill history here. Find someone in the room. Okay. So here are the rules of what we're going to do. You're going to talk nonstop. I want you to not stop talking, no matter what. This is very important, okay? So you're going to face each other, okay? Get in that comfortable, some of you it'll be this close, some will be a little further away. If you spend a lot of time in China, it's going to be right here. And what I want you to do is talk about your topic nonstop for 15 seconds, okay? But I want you both to talk at the same time. On your mark, face each other, get set, talk. Keep talking. Keep talking. I want you both to talk. Okay, you can stop. All right, so quick show of hands. Who thinks they got 100% of what the other person was saying? Okay, 50%. 10%. 0%. Who like just didn't get anything? Okay. So you can go ahead and sit down for a second. Now, again, this may seem like a silly thing, like people laugh. Who agrees that was really uncomfortable? Show of hands. Who found that extremely uncomfortable? Okay. So it's uncomfortable, and we all know you don't do this, right? Some of us might have that friend who does kind of do this, but for the most part, we don't do this because we know this is bad communication. But I have a little note for you. We actually do this, okay? Because what happens is, especially in an emotionally charged situation, we have an internal dialogue. And what happens is you start thinking about what it is you want to say or how you disagree with the person, okay? When you're in that emotionally charged situation. And your subconscious mind, the Broca's region, doesn't really know the difference when you're talking out loud and when you're talking inside your own head. There's not a huge difference going on there. So when you're having that internal conversation in your own mind, you're not really able to hear what the other person's saying. You're not really able to take it in and process it. So this is kind of a light bulb for a lot of people because people think, oh, I'm a good communicator and I don't know. But what they don't realize is they're talking all the time and they're having arguments all the time. And when things get emotional, they start going off in their own tangent. So the power of empathic listening is that this forces you to turn off that internal voice that's talking and going off in its own space, okay? By being intentional, having the intention of listening, you actually process what's being said. So the process for empathic listening works like this. First of all, one of you has to go first. You can't both do it at the same time, right? Step one. So generally, you have to allow the other person to talk. Let them know, look, I want to hear what you're saying. Okay, I'm going to let you speak and listen to them with the intention of being able to play back to them what they said. But everyone knows a parrot can repeat what you say. What you want to do is be able to repeat what they said to them in your own words, to be able to summarize it, because that forces you to actually actively engage your brain, process it, and put it in your own words. Okay? So this is the technique for empathic listening, and it's incredibly effective. The other side of that equation is when the other person has heard you kind of playing back to them what they said, it allows them to drop their guard. It allows them to go, okay, I feel heard. And as we all saw, we all raise our hand. We all want to be understood. If you can help the other person feel understood, then they're able then to drop their guard and start listening to you. So this is the difference between active and passive listening. What percentage of what the other person said did you hear? Well, you heard 100%, right? Unless you're deaf, every sound, you couldn't help but hear someone talking 1 foot away from you, right? Those sounds made it into your ears. They just didn't make it into your brain, into your mind, because you weren't intentional. You were passive. So this is the concept of active listening, forcing yourself to listen in a way where you can repeat to the person, where you can process in your own words what they said. But sometimes that's not good enough. Sometimes things break down, and you can't even get the other person to open up and talk to you because they're so emotionally torn up, okay? And when we get in this state where emotions are driving things, things go really off the rails. And there's a reason for this. Our minds, the way that we're wired, if you look at like cognitive behavioral therapy, one of the best things to come out of that is this understanding that if you take people and you just give them a simple logical test, no problem. They can answer a simple logical test. If you take the same subset of people and you get them in an emotional state, really emotional, they could be angry, they could be depressed, they could be hurt, it doesn't matter. A very emotional state, the frontal lobe of the brain shuts down. The human part of the brain goes haywire, and they can't process what's being said. Okay? So I like to think of survival situations. Okay? I'm very into outdoor stuff and survivalist stuff and all that. And I've read a lot about these things. And if you look at people who survive life or death situations, it's not the most fit person. It's not necessarily the youngest person. It's usually the person who's thought, what will they do in that situation? They've already got a plan ahead of time. So when things go wrong, they just execute the plan. People who don't have that plan, when something goes horribly wrong, they're deer in the headlights, right? And what happens to the deer in the headlights? It gets hit, right? So this happens with us in our relationships, right? It could be with a boss, it could be with someone, your significant other. Things start to go off the rails, emotions start to trigger, and our brain starts shutting down. The frontal lobe of the brain shuts down, okay? And we are no longer able to process with our human part of our brain. We start processing with the mammalian part of the brain, okay? Our emotions take over. So what I think many people experience is one person is a lot more emotional. They're really upset in an argument, in a communication where things are going wrong. And the other person's trying to reason with them, but that doesn't make sense. What you're saying, it's not logical, right? And they're trying to, it's like the human talking to the dog, right? You're not using logic and reason. And what does the other person do? They get upset. They're like, you don't hear me, you don't understand me. And they get even more upset. And things spiral. Who's seen this happen in their own relationships? Yeah? Everyone in the room, right? So what happens then? You're using logic and reason, and they're really emotional. Or maybe you're on the other side of it. Maybe you're on the dog side, and you're having the emotions, okay? So what happens from there? Well, the person who can see logic and reason starts to get frustrated, and they get upset. And then what happens? Right? Then you got two dogs barking at each other. You're in your emotional state, and things derail. And at that point, it's virtually unrecoverable, okay? Now, having a plan for this situation right here can keep you from ending up in this situation right here, okay? Having a plan for when things go wrong and then executing that plan is a really valuable thing to have. So what I recommend is identify the relationships, identify the situations where things go horribly awry in your life, and then think about the emotional state. Think about how it feels when you start to slide into that place where maybe you raise your voice, or maybe you say hurtful things, or maybe you just shut down completely. What does it feel like when you're heading that way? Learn to identify that state. Okay, that's step one. You need to be able to identify it before you go completely off the rails. Okay? The second thing is have a plan for what you'll do. Now, I used to have a plan. I was in a relationship, and when I would get really upset and they would get upset, I would go, you know what? I care about you very much. I want us to work through this. I need to walk away. And I will come back and we'll deal with this. And I would go and I would take a walk for a few minutes and I would calm down, and then I could come back and talk and things would go well. Sometimes you can't do that, okay? Because sometimes the emotions of the other person are such that you can't leave. They're going to get really upset. So what you need to do at that point is have a plan for highly emotional situations. One of the most powerful things that I've found is connecting again with that primal human that we talked about in the beginning. Now, I talked about the evolution of us from animals to mammals to human beings to modern human beings who can articulate. Well, we've got hundreds of millions of years as animals and as mammals. Okay? We've got a few million years, 15 million maybe as humans, Homo sapiens. We've got couple 100,000 years as modern Homo sapiens, 15 million since we were great apes, right? So we've got tons and tons and tons of programming that's like the dog, right? It's emotional programming. And what I've found is when you are doing that thing we talked about a minute ago, where you're trying to use logic with someone else who's in an emotional state, you're trying to solve, it's like trying to solve a math problem with art, right? Two different languages. You can't solve a math problem with art. Maybe some, but I'm not sure. So what you need to do is address the emotions first. You can't address the logic first because the emotions have shut down the logical part of the person's brain. Okay? So you have to address the emotions first. You can worry about the logic and the argument later. So having a plan when things start to go off the rails to address the emotions of that person can completely circumvent having these problems. And for me, the most powerful thing that I've seen is actually connecting with that caveman that we saw in the beginning, right? Connecting with that mammal, connecting with that dog. We had millions and millions of years of physical communication, of in-person communication. So one of the most powerful things that I've found is just, obviously this wouldn't be at work, but going, look, you know what? We already took the test earlier. We're all on the same page, right? We all want good in our relationships. You and I want good. We want to have a good relationship. I don't want you to be upset, and I know you don't want me to be upset. And I'm really sorry that you are upset. Acknowledging the emotional state. and then acknowledging the situation that, look, neither of us wants this. And the most powerful thing you can do is then open your arms, say, give me a hug. Let me give you a hug. And seriously, try this in your relationships with family, with close friends, with your significant other. Forget about the argument first. Forget about trying to address a part of their brain that's shut off. And look for a way to engage the emotions that are triggered and let them know, I'm on your side. I care about you. Opening up your arms, giving a hug, and just going, I am with you. I'm here for you. We'll sort through this stuff later. The most important thing is we're on the same team. We want the same thing. And then that allows, and by the way, I've shared this with a lot of people, and I've gotten a lot of feedback from a lot of people, that their relationships have completely changed. Because at that point, you now are able to re-engage the logical part of the brain. And now you can actually talk about whatever the problem was. So having a plan like that, or coming up with a plan that works for you, a survival plan, can be really a powerful thing. And it helps you evolve your communication to go from the caveman who's grunting and pointing at stuff up to a more evolved human being. So I hope that you found something in here that was helpful, that was valuable, just even a little nugget that you could take with you and apply to your own relationships. Try it out. Follow up with me. Let me know. It worked. Hey, you know what? This didn't work. But I hope you found something of value today. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.